Alrighty. Good morning slash afternoon, wherever it is you are tuning in from, both on YouTube and on TikTok. We have some folks on both platforms. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm News 6 meteorologist David Nazario, and we're going to be talking about what's going to be happening over the next 2 weeks. We're going to be discussing what's expected to form up within the next 48 to 72 hours. And then the potential for another more southerly winter storm developing through the Texas panhandle. We're going to go from a Colorado low to a Texas low thanks to the changes in our jet stream that we're going to be happening. And Brady over on TikTok asks, are we able to ask about certain areas? Absolutely. I have a plethora of information that I'm going to be pulling up for everybody, so feel free to ask all the questions that you want. I'm going to try not to go too long, though, because I want to also shoot some content that I can upload to both platforms, TikTok and then as well as YouTube. But thank you so much for everybody who's tuning in. We're going to go ahead and just get started saying hello to everybody on TikTok, and then let's say some introductions for YouTube. Mick and Marley, yo, what's good? It's good to see you. Super Charas, what is up? Tim, me in Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois is definitely in the battle zone. All of the Midwest and the Ohio River Valley are really going to be in the greatest slot for the snowfall. A really nice band of snowfall, anywhere between 6 to 12 inches plus in some isolated areas. RJ Utenruther, forgive me if I'm saying that wrong over on TikTok. No rush unanswered. Any chance Des Moines, Iowa gets a couple inches Sunday? As a matter of fact, I would say so. Iowa is also in the battle zone, is what we'll call it. So let's go ahead and get started. This is a look at our water vapor satellite shot. We're kind of priming the atmosphere right now. And the reason I say priming is if you look at this small sliver of channel darkening there, that is the presence of a jet stream. And then we have another area of jet energy still spilling across the deep south. A little bit of our subtropical jet, which, in my opinion, is a little bizarre given that we have our La Nina cranking right now. Usually our subtropical jet is not necessarily non-existent, but it's not as readily apparent as it has been. That's what helped to really intensify the severe weather outbreak that occurred about a week or so ago, I believe it was, guys. It was right after Christmas. We were tracking it. So yeah, about maybe 5 to 7 days prior, we had that outbreak that cut across the southern plains, the deep south, and into the southeast and mid-Atlantic. Kind of the same song and dance here. However, the polar front jet is much further to the south now as a result as well, and that's why it's cold all the way down here, even in central Florida. We started the day with temperatures in the upper 30s, low 40s, and that's the song and dance across the rest of the United States. You can also see as well from my folks on YouTube, because I know I get a lot of folks who tune in from the Caribbean still, we have a lot of moisture down there, and these next couple of cold intrusions are going to make it that far south. You'll probably see your rain chances and especially your wind speeds going up down at ground level where you can feel them, and you're also going to slowly start drying out, which of course is always good news for our neighbors down to the south if you reside in central Florida. I'm going to switch gears and we're going to go out to the western United States so we can break down what is already happening. So this is why we're looking at such fierce winter activity. Look at this very tightly wound up ball of energy, this upper level low, with what look to be multiple little short waves, little perturbations in the upper level pattern embedded within it. You can see them right there. I have little X's drawn showing where there's a little bit of enhancement in your pattern going on. A full-fledged atmospheric river setup in place for California, the Pacific Northwest, streaming across the Sierra Nevadas. We're probably getting some downsloping winds out there right now. That perpendicular, what's called cross-barrier flow hitting the Sierra Nevadas out there right there. Winds cutting across it. You can see the lee of the mountain enhancement, the cirrus that's developing on the opposite side. That is a recipe for strong surface winds. We used to forecast that a lot when I was at the 25th OWS in Tucson. And that's what's going to continue to move across the central Rockies and provide the Four Corners states, parts of Nevada, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, even getting into the Flagstaff area, northern Arizona, a shot for some higher terrain snowfall. This is what's going to continue to stream across the United States and develop into something big over the Central Plains. And now before we get into the snowfall, I also want to bring this up. This was something that we talked about on my last live stream on YouTube. Storm Prediction Center for day 3 has us at a level 2 out of 5 risk for the Texarkana, Louisiana, Mississippi area, trying to squeak further off towards the east into Tennessee, parts of West Virginia, not West Virginia, I'm so sorry, that's Kentucky, and Alabama. And I do think this is going to bleed over to the right ever so slightly, depending on how much what's called return flow, southerly flow, we can get out ahead of this system. The pressure gradient, which is essentially the differences between the center of the low and any higher pressure around it, is going to be strong. It is going to be very strong, so your surface winds are going to be cranking, and that southerly wind that's going to help to try to pull up moisture is going to be there. So I think whether you're watching on TikTok or YouTube right now, anywhere in this general area, I think is really decent and should favor severe weather. Now, whether or not it's widespread or more sporadic or right along that frontal line, that remains to be seen. That definitely remains to be seen. We still have a couple days out. I want to get some higher resolution model data in before we start to pinpoint all of that. But with that being said, let's go ahead and swing right into our snow forecast, because I know everybody is talking snow. There's still a bunch of folks over on TikTok hyping snowfall for Florida. I don't know why. I really don't. It was never a widespread risk. It was never a realistic risk. I mean, I saw one video. I'm not going to name who it was, but I saw one person who is not even weather related. They're not a meteorologist or an enthusiast or anything, talking about how the European ensembles had a 2% risk, a 2% chance for snowfall in Tampa and Orlando. That's not how you use that ensemble product. That is far from it. And then he went on to mention hail, bruh. Like, come on. Anyways, this is going to be a look at our NOAA blend of models. And the reason I want to bring the NOAA blend in, as the name implies, it's a blend of different model output. And as a result, we're looking at multiple computer models, and you're getting an average thinking of where it is they are confident that if you're going to see snow, it's going to be where the shades of color pull up. And you can see this is already 24 hours into the future. There you go. You can see over the Sierra Nevadas in California, Nevada, the Cascades and the mountains up there in Oregon, Washington State, a lot of it going on around the Snake River Valley of Idaho and the Front Range of the Rockies in Montana. Already seeing some pretty decent snowfall. Those are totals, particularly on the higher terrain, anywhere between 3 to 6, trying to squeak into the 7 to 10 inch threshold. You could see in Oregon we have an area that could possibly exceed a foot of snow, but again, that's 5, 6, 7,000 feet high, obviously. You take this through time, and there you go. This is going to be 48 hours from now. This is as we're getting into the middle portions of the day on Sunday. You can see the NOAA blend bleeds the snowfall through Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, finally starting to pick up on accumulations for portions of the Dakotas. A lot going on in Nebraska, and especially a lot possibly going on through Kansas. So if you've been commenting on my most recent posts on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, etc., I'd been mentioning that if you reside somewhere in the northern plains, the Midwest, near the Great Lakes, in the Ohio River Valley, you are definitely front and center for this snowfall, especially since we are now pretty confident on the track of the low pressure. We're going to see development, we call it cyclogenesis, somewhere right in through here. Somewhere in this general area between Oklahoma and Kansas, that is where our system is likely to develop. Let me change the color of the ink so you can see it a little bit more apparent. If I had to forecast based off of this snow output here, and don't ever do this, this is just because I can kind of recognize the setup and the structure around a low pressure, I would say we're going to see some kind of development right in through here as it comes off the Front Range of the Rockies. And as that cold air that's already in place to the north, you can even see some lake effect going on for the Great Lakes as well already. That's going to help to pull down your cold air. We'll tap into our moisture that's coming in from the south, and as it comes across like so, that's where your snow band is going to develop. And as this system tracks off in this general fashion, pretty much moving almost due east, anybody on the north side of that line, and like I mentioned, I have a lot of folks who are questioning and asking and commenting from like Tennessee, the Carolinas, from Virginia, Kentucky. And it's difficult. It really is. We're splitting hairs at this point as to whether or not you're going to see snow. You're going to be right there You're going to be right there on the axes of that low pressure center. And as a result, you're probably going to get a combination of different things. You're going to have a rain-snow mix. You're probably going to see a lot of icing, possibly sleet, maybe ice pellets, as well as freezing rain. We're going to talk about that as well because that could be very dangerous. The snowfall is one thing, especially if it piles up like the NOAA blend is showing here, ripping from Kansas, Nebraska, all the way through to West Virginia, trying to squeak into the southwest corner of Pennsylvania before it gets off towards the east coastline. You can see at the 72-hour mark, much of southern Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, West Virginia, the northern half of Virginia, trying to get up there into New York State even. I can see New York State, Connecticut, Manhattan Island getting in on a little bit of the flurry action. Nothing too crazy. We're going to have a lot of cold air with this, and if this system does deepen as much as it's, as it's looking, we could see enough to stimulate just a little bit of snow, if not a little bit of ice, for our folks up there in the extreme northeast. And then you fast forward to 96 hours, there's that next perturbation that's going to be coming through. Sorry, forgive me, I'm getting things on my phone right now. Stand by, sorry about that. Seems like people always want to call me when I'm on a live stream. Then you go through 96 hours, and you start to see that second system beginning to develop and dip south into New Mexico. So New Mexico could really be looking at some higher terrain snowfall as well. And then this is where it becomes questionable, because if you notice the NOAA blend, I'm just going to go fast forward through for the sake of time. The NOAA blend does show that parts of Texas, Arkansas, the northern boot of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, there's trace amounts of snow. And I say trace because that's difficult. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see immediate snowfall. What that means is the model is picking up on parameters, temperatures at the surface, temperatures in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, moisture content, lift to produce these snow showers or snow storms. Because remember, even though it's cold, even though we're mostly looking at stable conditions because, it's cold out, we're not talking Cape thunderstorms or anything like that. The models are going to paint these images down there because they're picking up on other variables that could produce snow. And that's why I always try to mention to people, don't look at the folks who mention 2%, 6%. Like, come on, you're really digging. What's the term that they say? Wishful thinking. You're wish casting at that point. We'll move over to the European model. This is your 12-hour snowfall. The Euro, once again, in direct line with the NOAA blend, with that big stream, that band of snowfall falling from southern Nebraska, much of Kansas, through the Midwest, out to the East Coast, moving west to east as it does so. You can see some of our values in southern Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, and regular Virginia State, getting up there into the 10 to 12-inch threshold. So we'll have to watch that closely. And then the Euro does bring down that next system. However, it stops the snowfall as we get out of the higher terrain, the western half of Texas. So I just had somebody ask on YouTube, will there be any snow in New Mexico? It does seem like it. It seems like all of our models are consistent that being a little higher up in terrain and elevation, New Mexico has a decent shot of seeing some snowfall, especially as that low pressure tries to become a little bit more progressive and get up out of there. Yesterday when I shot my TikTok update, I noticed that the models were thinking the pattern could get stuck, and that would eliminate the potential for any kind of snowfall in the south. Now again, the Euro is showing a marginal chance, a very marginal chance for snowfall. But then also check this out as well. Notice how the European model, I'll stop it at the 210-hour mark. See how the Euro is picking up on some lake effect for Michigan, parts of southeast Ontario, getting into New York State, Pennsylvania. And we also have this huge glob of gray shading there and down here. The next possible storm system is expected to take shape somewhere in western Texas and move in like this fashion. East, and then eventually curving back towards the east-northeast with our jet stream. I'm not too sure why. I really hope my mic isn't starting to just fall apart. I haven't been using this too often, and I don't know why the mic is cutting in and out. That's weird. It never used to do that before, and I'm not touching it. You guys on YouTube can see that I'm not touching it, which is weird. That makes me sad. I hope I'm not going to be needing a new microphone soon. My sound is still coming through on TikTok, and I see on OBS it's still being picked up okay. I haven't really touched this setup in a while, so I'm not too sure. Stream health is good, but we're going to keep going. Folks are mentioning that it's fine on TikTok as well, which is strange. I don't know if it's maybe a YouTube thing or something. Anyways, the reason I bring up these different shades of color is the model here is suggesting that we could have trace amounts to 1 inch or 2 of snow across the Midwest, across the Great Lakes, into the Northeast. And the reason I highlight that is because, again, it goes back to the model just simply showing parameters that could produce snowfall. That's another reason why I don't like to forecast snow 10, 12, 15 days out. And a lot of these folks that you probably watch on TikTok and so on and so forth, they need to stop doing that as well, because it's going to get a lot of people's hopes up, or it's going to make a lot of people distraught, and they're not reading the models right. So whenever you look at these snowfall accumulations, the model is showing we have the liquid to freezing ratio, we have the moisture, we have the lift, we have the temperature profile, we have everything we need to produce snow. Now, will the snowmaker be there? That's the thing. That's the tricky part. And then here's the latest look at the European ensembles for your total snowfall, so you can see the general accumulation as we go through time. And again, very small amounts down there in the south. I'm talking extremely small, light shading. So I would not put a ton of confidence in seeing any kind of snow stick if you're down there in the Gulf Coast states. I think New Mexico and Texas have a great shot at seeing it, and then especially for our folks with this first winter storm cutting across the Central Plains, the Midwest, out to the East Coast, have a great shot at seeing snowfall. This is a very quick glance at the ensembles here for the GFS, showing the Dakotas, Nebraska, and the Central Plains getting in on a lot of that snowfall action. Kansas, northern Oklahoma, getting into Arkansas. Well, not Arkansas, I'm so sorry. Missouri, and then moving into Illinois as it rapidly escalates off towards the east. And then here is your National Weather Service NDFD model. This is one of the higher res models that go out far enough to where we can see it. And the NDFD is also thinking anywhere between 3 to 6 inches for Kansas, northern Missouri, central Illinois, Ohio, portions of Indiana, very southernmost Iowa, Nebraska getting in on it, but then that snow line cuts off as you try to squeak into the northern border of Oklahoma. Some getting into Kentucky, the higher terrain will probably see it. Nothing too much for Tennessee, West Virginia, there it is, bleeding into Ohio, southwest Pennsylvania, with the lake effect kicking in for northwestern Pennsylvania, western New York State. Michigan could see some lake effect as well as Wisconsin, maybe a chance at some lake effect snow. That's about it. And then screaming off towards the east. Now, another thing I want to pull up, which I think is a little bit more dangerous than your snowfall, is going to be your icing risk. And this is why I'm bringing it up and mentioning it. If you look, there's a pretty good chance at icing, sleet, or freezing rain, a combination of them as well, for Nebraska and Kansas as this low begins to spin. This is a threat that could be a little more prevalent for our viewers out there in Kentucky and Tennessee, because of where the low pressure is going to track. If it forms up along the southern half of Kansas, the northern border of Oklahoma, and moves due east, because you're right there near the spin, and that's what I'm going to call it. You're right there where the air is turning. It's spinning. You're going to have a lot of mixing going on. And just to kind of put it in as easy of terminology to understand, you have the cold air being magnetized down from the north, and you have what's left of our warmth down here in the south kind of being funneled in like a vacuum towards that counterclockwise spin. And that's why you get the transition from rain to freezing rain, sleet, icing, and then snow, because you have your temperatures being mixed up like a bag of chips. You throw some cheese in the bag of chips. I know a lot of folks used to do it with the Flamin' Hot Cheetos back in the day. They would throw the melted cheese into Flamin' Hot Cheetos, and you close the bag, shake it up. That's what's happening. You have your warm air being the melted cheese, and then you have the cold air being the Flamin' Hot Cheetos. I know that's kind of a conundrum. You have Flamin' Hot Cheetos as the cold air, David. Come on, fam. And as that mixture happens, you're going to transition between crunchy chips and melted cheese to a combo of the two. You're going to have your melted cheese wrapped up in the Cheetos, and you're going to get that combo transitioning from heavier rain, icing, that freezing rain risk, to your bona fide snowfall the further north and west you go. Typically, it's your wraparound snowfall that'll be the heftiest on the backside, the north and western quadrant of your low pressure. Could you get that rain-snow line along that leading edge of it? Yeah, you definitely can. If I were to draw, let me go ahead and draw it in here as well for you guys. I'll draw it big, okay? This is going to be not for reference, but there's your low. Here's the spin around the low. You have your warm front there and then your cold front there. So as your warmth is being pulled to the north, this is your rain, sleet, snow line there. Anywhere from the north here in that small half circle, half oval is where you can get a combo of wintry precip. It could be ice pellets. It could be freezing rain. It could just be straight up sleet. It could just be icing, truthfully. You could still stay in your lighter to moderate rainfall, but then it begins to slowly but surely glaciate over as the cold air wraps in. Then I'll change the color, and as you get further away from there, that's when your snowfall begins, because you have your actual authentic freezing temperatures being pulled in on the backside of the low, helping to support the cold front. And then obviously as that cold air wraps in, that's where you begin that collision course for possible severe weather, depending on how unstable the air is out ahead of that cold front. So you can see at the 60-hour mark, the 66-hour, and the 72-hour mark, you could be looking at a potential dangerous, if not very hazardous, ice storm for Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Virginia, with the upper halves of Tennessee and North Carolina needing to watch closely, as well as maybe a chance in the Oklahoma Panhandle, northeast Oklahoma, pending any wiggling and wobbling that could go on with our low-pressure center. So the icing concern is going to be an issue. And to give you a time frame, that icing and the snow could begin as we go through late day Saturday, early morning Sunday, and then we're off to the races from there till about Monday, Tuesday time frame is when that's going to continue to move off towards the east. I also have Weather Bell pulled up so we can take a look at the Spire model. I haven't really used the Spire too much, but this is just another, utility tool on my belt. You could see exact same song and dance, though, from Kansas, the Central Plains, Dakota seeing some light snowfall, but your heaviest band on the north and west side of the low is going to occur in Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, with lake effect for Michigan likely, lake effect for Pennsylvania, New York State very likely, and then you have the northern half of Kentucky, a lot of West Virginia, the northern border, the top one-third of Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Connecticut, up there getting in on some of the snowfall action as well. And that's corroborated very well by the Spire model. This is your 0Z model run. If I go a little further in time, it does show the snowfall risk for New Mexico, the Mogollon Rim of Arizona, getting into parts of the Texas Panhandle and West Texas. From there, the Spire really doesn't do too much. It has maybe some very, very trace amounts of snow cutting across Louisiana, the Gulf Coast states. But again, if you look at the gauge down here at the bottom, we're talking a trace amount to somewhere trying to squeak into half an inch to an inch. But again, that's going to be very heavily determined by how much cold air is still down there and how much moisture this system has with it. Great question, Kevin Rivera over on YouTube. I will, for the most part, I believe I'm going to aim for Sunday. I'm going to aim for early Sunday. We're going to talk our tropics again. I'm not going to get too heavy into that right now, but I have been looking. I have notes taken with our latest Climo data. And the reason I'm waiting for Sunday is so we can get our European seasonal model data as well, so we can talk about that. Here's one last look at the GFS before we continue on down through the stream. You can see the GFS totals are going to be in the exact same spot, a little bit further to the north as well, eliminating some of the snowfall risk for Oklahoma, Tennessee, and North Carolina. So if you are North Carolina, I hate to say it, but you're going to be a hair's breadth away from seeing snowfall with this. I really do think you're going to be more of a rain event, to tell you the truth. You see the GFS has trended just a little bit further to the north. And I will say, because I had some people on TikTok mention, oh, you're dead wrong. This never started in the south. Yes, it did. Look at the date. It's January 3rd. I saw a bunch of all of your favorite influencers mentioning, watch down here for snowfall for the Gulf Coast. And it's like, well, yeah, that was due the 6th of January to the 8th of January. Notice how far we've come. This was where it was initially forecast, and now it's much further towards the north, which makes a lot more sense of where the jet is going to be. All right, now, Let's shift gears. We talked snow. We're pretty much locked in at this point. So if there's anyone on TikTok or even on YouTube waiting to hear snowfall, I can confidently say we are just about locked in for seeing snow anywhere from the southern half of Nebraska, especially Kansas, all the way through. If you take a straight line and you draw from Kansas straight to the East Coast, if you're on that line or to the north of it, that's where your snow is likely to be. I'll even draw it on this map here so everybody can see one last time. This is where your low is likely to form. If I take this and draw a straight line to the right, all this general area to the north side of that line could see snowfall. So that's definitely what my preliminary prediction is, especially with how close we are in time. We're looking at this thing starting to get going at 36 to 48 hours from where we sit right now. I don't anticipate we're going to have very, very much more adjustment to be had. It's the second one down here, the wild card in Texas, that I'm kind of still thinking over, kind of still watching over. Cleveland, Ohio, Circleville, Ohio could definitely see some snow. I would say error on the lighter side, though. The further north you go, 1 to 3 inches, maybe getting up towards 6 inches, but you definitely have your greatest shot at snowfall in Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, so on and so forth. Now, we're going to shift gears because I know I do still have a lot of people watching from the south. And we're not only going to talk snowfall, we got to talk severe weather as well, because that's something we highlighted on our last live stream, and Storm Prediction Center is picking it up as well. You can see as we go through late in the day on Saturday into Sunday, this is going to be your lightning, your total flash rate, or your density of lightning as we go through. Now, this is Sunday getting into the morning time. This is about 10, 11 o'clock, give or take. And you can already see some pretty good thunderstorm action happening near I think that's near Dallas, Fort Worth, to the east of that area, Beaumont, Texas. To the north of Houston, we have our stuff firing. Southern half of Arkansas, getting into the Shreveport, Barksdale Air Force Base area of Louisiana. That's going to continue to unravel and unzip. You can see it does get down into the Houston area, the Beaumont area, and then much of Louisiana is engulfed, spilling into Mississippi, the western half of Mississippi, as we get towards the warmest part of the day on Sunday. And then Arkansas slowly but surely trying to clear out, and this continues to transition eastward and get a little bit on the stronger side as you get down towards Baton Rouge, New Orleans, the southern half of Mississippi, before it starts to lose steam. Because, again, we're still fairly cold down there in the southeast, and we're really going to have to watch closely how much return flow comes through. Here's a look at your temperatures. I have the temperatures pulled up just so we can kind of get a rough estimate of how much warmth the models are projecting down in that area. And I also want to point out here, if you look up at Kansas, where I had that line drawn previously, the temperatures are already there for snowfall. I mean, look at Colorado, the front range of Colorado down to 8 degrees in some spots. Obviously, those are the Rockies. That's very high up. But then in general, as we go through this morning into the afternoon, we're already below freezing from much of Kansas further off towards the east. And as that low pressure begins to dig in, you'll notice that those temperatures pull south and then the warm air comes up out of the Gulf. These are the soupy temperatures that we want to see if we're talking the chance for severe weather. Notice over the Gulf of Mexico, the warmer waters, relative warmer waters. I know we've cooled off, but they're still relatively warm. Over Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas as of this morning, we're in the 50s, maybe low 60s, right up against the coastline, thanks to the Gulf of Mexico enhancing that environment just a little bit. As we start to get the clock moving forward, you'll notice the mixing of the air that goes on with our low pressure that begins to establish itself. Still seeing the movement of cold air across the central plains into the deep south, and that's going to prime us for that snowfall. This is late in the day on Friday. This is Friday afternoon. Notice in Kansas and further north, and I want you guys to use that as your reference point. Kansas, if you know you're in a state to the east of Kansas and the north of that line, you have a pretty good shot at seeing your snowfall. If you're in Kansas to the right and south, if you're to draw a straight line from the Kansas-Oklahoma border to the east coast, the Atlantic coast, and you're south of that line, your chances for snow go way down with this first system. I'll go ahead and fast forward rapidly through Saturday. Here it is. Now you can start to see that mixing effect beginning to take place. Look at how the warmth really returns for Texas, the southern half of Louisiana, still fairly frigid in the parts of Arkansas and the eastern half of Oklahoma. But as that low begins to transition, we have a very strong gradient between Kansas and the Texas-Oklahoma panhandle. Western Kansas is at 29 to 26 degrees, with temperatures in the Texas panhandle about almost 30 degrees more towards the warm side. A 30-degree increase, and that's definitely enough to start getting some instability to mix in down there. Now you can start to see the movement of that low pressure. See what's happening here for folks on TikTok and on YouTube. See this? There's your cold front beginning to establish itself. So the model here, the Euro as of 6Z, is thinking our low pressure is going to establish itself right along the border of Kansas and Oklahoma. Could be a little further to the north, could be a little further to the south than there. We'll have to wait and see by about Saturday morning where that energy begins to bleed off of the higher terrain of the Rockies and get into the Central Plains. That'll tell us even more about projecting our snowfall and our freezing rain risk off towards the east. But this is what we want to watch for that potential for severe weather and even freezing rain. This is where I do think we're going to have the greatest shot at severe weather if this does hold true. Look at the strong gradient of temperatures that's coming down and surging in from the south. There's your mixing area. If we had all the instability to play with down here, I would definitely anticipate this is where your severe weather is going to initiate and keep moving off towards the east. Look at the curvature here, that thermal band, that thermal trough that extends back into your parent low pressure. That is a great spot for supercells and tornadic activity, but luckily the energy isn't quite there because we still have a lot of modifying polar air in place over Dixie Alley. Now, the further south you go, that changes. I'll go a little further into Sunday where the model was thinking our severe weather was going to initiate, and there you have it. You can see right in through here, bam, there's your severe weather quadrant. And you can see these temperatures do try to rebound fairly well. Look at southern Texas. Southern Texas back into the 80s according to the model here. There's your dense both Arctic and polar air being pulled down. Nebraska, Kansas getting down into the teens. Nebraska into the single digits for your surface temperature. And right in this area here where I have my Epic Pen drawing, I'll go ahead and change the color and shade it in. That's where that's probably not a good color to use. Let me use black. Right in through here is where your greatest risk for possible severe weather is going to exist. And the instability values do support this. The thing with that is after the low starts to track off due east, we're not going to have a ton of that instability bleed further towards the southeast. So the threat is going to slowly diminish as we get through Alabama, Georgia, the Florida Panhandle, and up the mid-Atlantic. And you can track it through as you go even further through time. Notice how, see what happens here, and I'll switch the view. Let me go over to the deep south so you can see. There you go. So see what's happening here? There's your battle zone for severe weather right there. That's your pinching effect as your low progresses off towards the east-northeast. And then see how we still have a lot of cold temperatures entrenched through eastern Alabama, much of Georgia getting into the Appalachians of northern Georgia. We're still in the upper 30s. Even after we just passed the warmest part of the day. So it's not going to be too warm out there. We're not going to see all the CAPE values in the low and mid levels of your atmosphere move off towards the east. This is the end of the run. I'm going to go back to 0Z so we can go just a little bit further in time. And you can see the 0Z even thinks much of the same. Your CAPE and your instability and your buoyant air. When I say buoyant, I mean where you can have your lift, where these thunderstorms can continue to fire and progress off towards the east. We do have a shot for rainfall, don't get me wrong, but again, look at how everything is just being pinched off. It's like a triangle here. There's your most buoyant air for the Panhandle, getting into Alabama. It's not going to make it too far into Georgia before we start to run headfirst in the cold air that's still entrenched down there. And then very rapidly after that, we're going to drop into the freezing temperatures for Monday, Tuesday, beyond that. Look at that. There's your Monday night into Tuesday morning, the 20s to the low 30s for everybody pretty much across the Gulf Coast, from the Gulf of Mexico coastline up in through the rest of Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and then the Ohio, Mississippi valleys. GFS is thinking the same thing. The GFS does a fantastic job of showing the exact same risk with a little bit of those temperatures trying to get up into western Tennessee where we could see some showers and storms. But that's the general takeaway. Right in through here is where we're probably going to have our greatest risk for severe weather. I'll go ahead and transition us over to our instability so you can see it. This is going to be the European model, the CAPE. See how the CAPE disappears? over Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, we have a pretty decent amount of that cape. That's why I want to avoid mentioning extreme, prolific, dangerous, widespread. There's already people out there saying this is going to be an extensive outbreak. I'm still on the fence of this being a more conditional severe weather setup than a absolute slam dunk of a severe weather forecast. And you can see very quickly as we go through Monday and Tuesday, those CAPE values really diminish into the southeast United States. We're talking Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas, Florida. So the rain risk will still be there, and the rain will probably carry over, but we're not going to be seeing anything in terms of very powerful, very robust thunderstorms, let alone discrete cells firing out ahead of our front in that warm conveyor. It's just not likely to happen. And on top of that, the fact that we don't have very much instability after that tells me we may not have enough juice in the environment to bring down even more snowfall. So that's why it's very questionable what happens next weekend with that potential storm system that could move through Texas and move east through Louisiana through to the Carolinas. Same thing here with the GFS. The GFS shows that the Cape actually goes down very fast after Mississippi. It doesn't even make it really into Alabama or the eastern half of Mississippi before it completely loses all of its luster. And then the GFS does have a little bit more of that energy hugging the coastline with that next storm system that wanders through. This is another reason why I do think severe weather is going to be a potential for that area, and the mid-level winds do a fantastic job of highlighting that as well. If you look right in through here, there's your 850 millibar low-level jet. We're pulling air from the Caribbean, the Yucatan, the Bay of Campeche, and putting it into the southeast United States. So that return flow is going to be there. You can see a high pressure in the mid-levels at about 5,000 feet right over Florida that's helping to drive all that air up. And when I say we're pulling air from the Caribbean, if you look at where the winds originate, they're down here near Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, Jamaica. We're taking this air, the tropical, subtropical air, and moving it up in front of our polar system, and that's why we have such strong outbreaks of severe weather, especially in a Niño pattern. It's very weird to see our systems troughed this far south into the same areas we had all of our outbreaks late 2023 into 24. From there, notice that your low-level jet keeps rocking, and we could still see some of these thunderstorms sustain themselves despite the instability into Georgia, the Carolinas, but not nearly as high of a risk. And I really wonder if Storm Prediction Center is going to try to move their risk area over. I'm not sure. I really don't think so, because we have such cold amounts of air coming down straight out of Canada down to the Gulf coastline. We're going to lose that warm conveyor. It's going to get pinched off like we saw in the surface temps. And then finally, before I switch back to questions, you can see in our theta E, I love to use the theta E, and basically all we're looking at here are the differences in air mass. There's your pinch zone right there, your conflict area between your polar and Arctic air coming down through the plains, and then what's being funneled up into the south. Right there is where your severe weather is going to occur. You can see it plain as day, and even in the theta value, see how the theta gets choked off because of all of our cold air that's still dammed up against the east coast? That warm conveyor gets pinched in the lowest levels of the atmosphere, and that's why the models are thinking it's going to cap off instead of really surging towards the north. So we'll see. Dixie Alley, the Deep South, definitely has a shot for severe weather. Here's our 3-kilometer NAM showing that squall line firing through Arkansas, western Tennessee, and moving through Louisiana on Sunday night into Monday morning. There's your freezing rain through Kentucky, parts of Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and the snow band along the backside of it. I'll switch the image here so you guys can see as well. See what I was talking about when I doodled for you? You can see there's your rain snow line, there's the freezing rain, and then as you get towards the north and west side of the low's here, there's where all your snowfall occurs because you're getting pulled back into the cold temps. We have someone spamming the capital letters on TikTok. I don't like when you do that. I will get back to questions in a second. And I'd mentioned that for New York, you could possibly get a small dose of snow flurries as this system transitions off towards the east. Lake effect for New York State, the very uppermost periphery of where your moisture and snowfall could be occurring in southern New York State. Moving from California to North Carolina with a stop in St. Louis next week. We leave Tuesday. Should we go through Colorado or Texas? If you leave on this upcoming Tuesday, I would say go through Colorado. because there will be snow. There's going to be leftover stuff from this system, but it's going to be transitioning towards the middle to latter half of next week from the Front Range of Colorado into New Mexico and then West Texas. And I wish I could go beyond this point. Let me see if I can switch over to the latest run of the GFS to show you what the GFS is thinking. There goes your next system. You can see the snowfall increasing for Colorado once again as we go through very early Wednesday and then Thursday, early morning Thursday, New Mexico and Texas getting in on that light snowfall. And then this is the questionable piece here. Where it is this next storm system is going to develop, because that's where your freezing rain, sleet, icing becomes an issue. And I still do think that icing, freezing rain is probably going to be the biggest risk for our folks in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and so on. The GFS has been very back and forth with this storm system, which means we can't take it with too much confidence or try to nail down exactly where everything is going to happen. You can see at 6Z, the GFS thought nothing at all. 12Z, we're back, more to the north, and then 0Z, we're back, more to the south. So there's still a lot of time to get ahead of this. If you look, pardon me, this is still just under 200 hours. Sorry, we can put a little more stock into this as we get to about the 100-hour mark. And I'm very curious to see what the European model has for us later on today as well, within the next hour or so. Yasmin, you're very welcome. Thoughts on Staten Island? Will it get more snow if the storm moves more to the north? Typical Giant fan, yes. If the storm does try to pull a little bit further to the north, your snow chances will go up. But I do see the chance for some flurries up there for Staten Island. I really do. We can go back to the blend of models and track it through. You can see you're right there. Staten Island is right here. Let me get my pen out. Right there. And you can see just off to your south, the blend is thinking 2 to 3 inches of snow. So the chance for some flurries up there, pending the wiggling and wobbling that the system does, could throw a little bit of that your way. Lexington, Kentucky, Luke, you're definitely in the ballpark for that freezing rain / snow risk, for sure. Again, remember, if you take a line from central southern Kansas right there and draw it east, with the curvature, obviously, of the United States and Earth, there's all this to the north is primed for some possible snowfall. Arkansas could, Melissa. Arkansas definitely could, but I'm still leaning more towards a freezing rain icing event. You can see on the blend here, Arkansas kind of with the very small trace amounts of snowfall. A lot of it is going to be riding on what that next system does. The GFS does seem to think that our storm system is going to develop in the northwest quadrant of the Gulf of Mexico and then track through. The European model also has a weak system down there, just not as robust, and a little bit of warmer temperatures backfilling in on it. So I would say, if anything, Arkansas probably has the greatest chance at getting a little bit of a wintry mix at best, depending on what that next system does. Like I said, I want to wait until the 12Z Euro comes out. Southeastern Virginia, it's going to be a little difficult because you're getting closer to the coastline. We'll have to see. Cincinnati, Ohio definitely has a shot for snow. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania has a shot for snow. Dallas, Texas will probably get some wraparound flurries if that second system develops, but you'll also have to deal with icing, if not sleet or freezing rain. Reading, Pennsylvania has a shot of anywhere between 1 to 3 on average, maybe trying to squeak into 3 to 6 because you're on the north side of that low, depending on how much moisture sticks with it and how cold the air how cold the air is out ahead of it. We'll have to see. Yeah, the storm continues to try to tug just a little bit further to the north. We're looking at our 0Z European model, and you can see that the European model keeps trying to take it further to the north before our triple point low forms and tries to tug it back down towards the south, somewhere near Virginia, North Carolina. That's how close of the boundary between rain, sleet, snow is going to be for our mid-Atlantic folks. It's going to be a very close call. Austin, Texas could get some ice out of that second one. We will have to see. Definitely have to see. Omaha, Nebraska could anywhere between 2 to 4 inches, it seems like, maximum. Remember, these are max forecast values as well. They're not exactly going to be dialing in how much you will legitimately see. These are max forecasted values. It's not like that's exactly how much that's going to fall. You got to remember that as well. Unzips on Florida. I mean that in terms of the atmosphere. You can see where your cold air or cooler air out ahead of your storm system versus the warm air in between the cool air and then the coldest air back behind it. You have that getting zipped in there. Philly could get a decent amount. Nashville is going to be close. You're going to be right there in that mixing effect of where your rain, sleet, icing, and snow is trying to be pulled into your parent low pressure. That's where your turning is going to be. It's very possible Kansas City. Very possible for the ice. St. Louis has a decent shot at getting snow. Indiana, you have a decent shot at getting snow. Florida, no chance. No chance for snow in Florida. I wish that we would let that rumor die. Maybe one flurry or two if we can stay cold as that next system comes through. But right now, I'm not really looking at Florida. Florida could maybe get some needed rain, if anything. Central Virginia has a good shot at getting some wintry precip, for sure. Boston has a decent shot. Honolulu, not even looking in that direction unless Honolulu is a spot here in the United States. Indiana has a good shot. West Virginia has a good shot. Indiana again. Central North Carolina, you're going to be on the periphery. I really do think it's going to be more of a rain/ice event for North Carolina. It'll be close. Baton Rouge, New Orleans needs to watch for severe weather over on YouTube. Chicago has a decent shot at snow, for sure. Definitely. Dallas, Texas, it's going to be close. A lot is going to be determined by that next system and how much cold air we can keep out there, how much moisture we can tug north out of the Gulf of Mexico, how much is present. And no, that's okay. For Ohio, you're looking at the stronger accumulations or the higher accumulations between 10 to 12 inches, the bottom 1/4 of the state. Bottom 1/4. This map is your total snowfall. Most envy me. This is your total snowfall. Then on average, Ohio could see anywhere between 1 to 3 inches. Some lake effect for Pennsylvania, New York State for sure with that lake effect. And then your heaviest snow band is going to go through Kansas, Missouri, southern Illinois, southern Indiana, extreme southern Ohio, northern Kentucky, West Virginia, especially over your higher terrain of the Appalachians out there, and then Virginia before exiting the East Coast. Central Missouri could definitely see some high amounts. I would say 13 to 16 isn't out of the ballpark. That is probably your upper threshold, though. Your upper threshold. William Morris, I can agree with that. New Orleans, possible freezing rain depending on how much cold air is still down there. Could transition to just a bona fide rain event. A lot is still up in the air for that second system. When is the best chance of Florida seeing some rain again? I believe we're looking at Monday or Tuesday of this upcoming week. Cold air can, in fact, reach the Caribbean. That is for sure, Mr. Man JJ. West Texas could see some snowfall. Virginia near D.C. could see a bit of the snow try to bleed over. A lot is going to be dependent on where this system will track. Tri-state area could see some snow/wintry mix. Snow totals should not have changed too much for Cincinnati. Not too much. We'll continue to dial it in over the next 24 hours as we get close to this system forming up. And then from there, it'll be a lot easier to dial in your snow once we start to see what starts to pile up in Nebraska, Kansas, the Front Range of the Rockies. But all right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and start wrapping up. We're getting close to the hour mark. I have other things to do, and I still want to shoot some content for social media so I can upload and actually have this ready for you to view. So if you have access to some of my more recent posts, if you have questions or comments or concerns on YouTube, drop them in the comment section down below of this live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you nudge that like button to get this information out to everybody. And then over on TikTok, for my viewers still watching there, I know I mentioned in my most recent post to drop a comment with your location in that new post. I'm going to try to get a new one out within the next 3 to 4 hours with an update and a breakdown of what we saw here. I may even just try to cut and splice some of this live stream together to put it out there for you. We'll see. But regardless, you'll have more information coming at you very, very soon. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again very soon. That is for certain. For my YouTube folks, tropical update, seasonal outlook, very early seasonal outlook will be coming out probably on Sunday is when I'm bullseyeing. Sunday will be my last morning show over at News 6, and once I get out of there, come home, get a little nap in since I will have been up since about 1, 2 in the morning, and then I'll dial in the rest of our tropical info so we can talk about that on Sunday. So Northern Kentucky could definitely see some really good snow, anywhere between 8 to 10 inches, I would say, on average, Trent. Good question over on TikTok. Middleburg, Virginia could see some snow as well. Virginia, West Virginia is right there on the nose of the northern side of where your snow band is likely to develop. So again, folks, I know that we have a lot of questions in the chat. Forgive me, I'm very limited on time, but I'm glad I got to talk to everybody. If you could, share this live stream over on YouTube. Drop me a comment. Find a way to leave me a comment or shoot me a message over on TikTok. I'll try to get back to you. Comments are a lot easier. Don't trust that you will see a message back from me if you send me a private message on TikTok. I get a lot of those, and it's very difficult to go through all my comments and then go back through messages, so forgive me. I would definitely say comments are your best bet, and I'll work hard to get back to them. But thank you all so much for watching. I'm going to go ahead and close out on YouTube first. You all know the drill. I'll see you again within the next day or two. This is Weather Center Nazario, signing out. All right, that's it for